as she pulled her hoodie over her head, hoping to stay incognito while boarding her flight to New York. She wasn't in a mood for attention today, just a quiet flight and some much-needed rest. But fate had other plans. As she reached the first-class entrance, a woman in an expensive designer coat huffed impatiently behind her. "Excuse me," the woman sneered, "but this line is for first-class passengers only." She looked Sandra up and down, her eyes full of disdain. Sandra blinked in surprise, then offered a polite smile. Look, I don't know what kind of upgrade you think you got," the woman interrupted with a condescending chuckle, "but maybe you should double-check your ticket. This isn't economy." A few passengers nearby turned their heads, sensing drama. Sandra felt heat rush to her cheeks, but she kept her cool. She didn't owe this woman an explanation. Before she could respond, however, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "She is in the right line," the voice said calmly, "and you should probably rethink how you treat people." The woman froze. Slowly, she turned around, only to find herself face-to-face with Keanu Reeves. Dressed in his usual understated black outfit, Keanu stood there, arms crossed, his sharp eyes locked on the rude woman. The shift in the woman's demeanor was immediate. Her arrogance melted it into wide-eyed embarrassment. "Keanu Reeves?" she stammered, suddenly flustered. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, and Sandra Bullock is right in front of you. You know, Academy Award-winning actress, you might have heard of her." The woman's face turned an impressive shade of red. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Sandra, suppressing a laugh, simply handed her boarding pass to the attendant, who grinned and waved her through. As she walked ahead, Keanu followed, flashing her a knowing smile. "That was satisfying," he murmured. Sandra chuckled. "I owe you one." Keanu shrugged. "You've saved my life in 2 movies. Figured I should return the favor at least once." The two friends walked onto the plane together, leaving the speechless woman behind, utterly humiliated, and now with the most awkward celebrity encounter of her life. As they took their seats, Keanu leaned over and whispered, "So should I be worried about you pulling a speed on this plane?" Sandra grinned. "Only if you plan on jumping out of it with me." And with that, they both laughed, settling in for a flight that was thankfully drama-free from that moment on. The end. Sandra Bullock humiliated by woman while boarding plane. No one knew Keanu Reeves was watching. Part 2. Sandra leaned back in her seat, exhaling deeply as the plane prepared for takeoff. Beside her, Keanu Reeves smirked, still amused by the scene that had unfolded moments ago. "Think she's still standing there, trying to process what just happened?" he asked, glancing toward the boarding gate. Sandra chuckled, probably Googling my entire filmography to make sure I wasn't just some random imposter. Their laughter was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Sandra and Keanu turned their heads. There she was, the rude woman from earlier. And to their absolute delight, she was walking straight toward the empty seat next to Sandra. Keanu covered his mouth, trying not to laugh. Sandra, meanwhile, just raised an eyebrow. The woman hesitated, clearly mortified, but she had no choice. She had paid for a first-class ticket, and her seat was right there. With a forced smile, she lowered herself into her seat. "What are the odds?" she muttered. Sandra, Ev the professional, simply smiled and said, "Small world." Keanu leaned forward. "Hey, I didn't catch your name earlier," he said, extending a hand. The woman hesitated before shaking it, mumbling, "Jennifer." "Nice to meet you, Jennifer," Keanu said smoothly. "So, do you often assume people don't belong in first class?" Jennifer's face burned red. I thought she was someone else," she said quickly, avoiding Sandra's gaze. Sandra, still in good spirits, decided to have a little fun. "No worries," she said sweetly. "Happens all the time. Some people don't expect me to fly commercial." Keanu gasped in mock shock. "Wait, you fly commercial? But aren't you like a billionaire superstar?" Sandra played along. "Oh, absolutely, but I like to humble myself by mingling with normal people." Jennifer looked down at her lap, her embarrassment now at peak levels. For the next hour, she stayed unnaturally quiet while Sandra and Keanu chatted away, reminiscing about filming Speed and laughing about the weirdest fan encounters they'd ever had. Then, something unexpected happened. Midway through the flight, turbulence struck. The plane jerked slightly, and Jennifer, despite her earlier arrogance, let out a terrified squeal and gripped the armrests. Sandra, ever the kind soul, placed a reassuring hand on Jennifer's arm. "Hey, it's okay. Just a little turbulence." Jennifer nodded, visibly shaken. "I hate flying," she admitted softly. Keanu smiled. "Don't worry, if anything goes wrong, I'll just reenact the Matrix and save us all." That earned a weak chuckle from Jennifer. As the flight continued, her walls began to come down. She started asking Sandra about her favorite movies, complimented her work in The Blind Side, and even apologized for her earlier behavior. Sandra smiled. It takes a big person to admit when they're wrong. No hard feelings. By the time the plane landed in New York, the three of them were actually laughing together. Jennifer had gone from an uptight stranger to someone who had just learned a valuable lesson about kindness and humility. As they stepped off the plane, Jennifer turned to Sandra and Keanu. "For what it's worth," she said, "this turned out to be the most memorable flight of my life." Keanu grinned. "Glad we could make it interesting." Sandra winked. "Just be careful who you judge next time. You never know who might be watching." With that, the three of them went their separate ways, leaving Jennifer with a story she'd never forget, and two Hollywood legends she'd never misjudge again. The end. Sandra Bullock humiliated by woman while boarding plane. No one knew Keanu Reeves was watching. As Sandra and Keanu walked through the terminal, still chuckling about their unexpected new friend, Sandra nudged Keanu playfully. "That was almost too easy," she said. "I think Jennifer's going to have an identity crisis after this flight." Keanu smirked. "Well, she learned her lesson. Plus, we made her trip unforgettable. Not every day you get put in your place by two movie stars." They exited the gate and were immediately met by a small crowd of fans and paparazzi, cameras flashing. Both stars were used to it, but after a long flight, neither was in the mood to deal with it. As Sandra adjusted her sunglasses, a voice called out from behind them. "Sandra, Keanu, wait up!" They turned around. Jennifer was running after them, her suitcase rolling wildly behind her. Sandra and Keanu exchanged glances. "Now what?" Jennifer, out of breath, stopped in front of them. "Look, I just wanted to say, I know I acted like a total jerk earlier, but I promise that's not who I am. I was just having a really bad day. I got into an argument with my boss. My boyfriend broke up with me over text, and I guess I took it out on the wrong person." Sandra softened. She knew what it was like to have a rough day, and while Jennifer's attitude had been awful at first, she could tell the woman genuinely regretted it. Keanu nodded. "We all have bad days. Just don't let them turn you into someone you don't want to be." Jennifer smiled. "You're right. And, if it's not too weird, can I take a picture with you guys? My friends are never going to believe this happened." Sandra exchanged an amused look with Keanu before shrugging. "Sure, but only if you promise to be nice to the next stranger you meet." Jennifer held up a hand. Scout's honor. The three of them posed for a selfie, Jennifer grinning in between two of Hollywood's most beloved stars. As Jennifer walked off, Sandra sighed and shook her head. "Well, that was unexpected." Keanu chuckled. "You've got a talent for turning enemies into friends." Sandra smirked. "What can I say? I'm just that charming." Keanu rolled his eyes playfully. "Or maybe you just intimidate people into submission." Sandra laughed, looping her arm through his. "Come on, Mr. Action Hero, let's go grab a coffee before our next adventure begins." And with that, the two friends disappeared into the bustling airport, ready to take on whatever came next, whether it was another movie, another flight, or just another unexpected encounter with a stranger. The end. Or maybe just the beginning. Sandra Bullock humiliated by woman while boarding plane. No one knew Keanu Reeves was watching, Part 4. The coffee shop inside the airport was bustling, but Sandra and Keanu managed to find a quiet corner to relax. The day's drama had been exhausting, but they were still in high spirits. Keanu stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, his mind clearly elsewhere. "So, what's next for you?" Sandra asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "You got anything on the horizon?" Keanu leaned back in his chair, his gaze softening. "A few things. I'm always working on something behind the scenes, but I'm looking forward to taking it easy for a bit." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "Taking it easy? You? That's a first." Keanu grinned. "I've learned to appreciate the quiet moments. Plus, I've got a new project coming up that's got me excited, but I'll leave that for later. What about you? Anything new in the works?" Sandra smiled, but there was a glint of something mischievous in her eyes. Actually, yes, I've been working on something very unexpected. Keanu leaned in. Unexpected how? She smirked, her eyes twinkling. Let's just say it involves a role where I'm not just acting. It's something a little more personal. Keanu gave her a knowing look. You're not thinking about going into directing or producing, are you? Sandra took a sip of her coffee, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she set it down and leaned forward. Well, funny you mentioned that. I might just be. Keanu's eyes widened in surprise. Wait, really? Yeah, she said, her voice low but filled with excitement. I've been working on a story, one that's very close to me. It's a kind of adventure comedy, but with a twist. Think The Proposal meets The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Keanu chuckled. Sounds like a Sandra Bullock special. She smiled, clearly enjoying his reaction. That's what I'm hoping. I want it to be something that shows a different side of me. Not just the quirky, funny person, but the person who's learned a thing or two about life, love, and, well, making mistakes. Keanu thought for a moment, then nodded. I like it. I think you've got a real talent for more than just acting. If you're serious about it, you know I'm here to help. Sandra smiled softly. Thanks, Keanu. That means a lot. Just as the conversation began to settle into a comfortable rhythm, a loud buzz interrupted them. Sandra's phone lit up, and she glanced at the screen with a sigh. It's my publicist, she muttered, swiping to answer. Hey, what's up? Keanu watched as Sandra's face shifted from relaxed to tense. Wait, what happened? He could hear the sharpness in Sandra's voice as she listened, and soon she snapped the phone shut, her hand gripping the edge of the table. Keanu leaned in, sensing the shift. What's wrong? Sandra's eyes were wide, her expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. You're not going to believe this. Apparently there's a viral video of our encounter from the plane. Keanu blinked. Wait, what? Sandra sighed, running a hand through her hair. Yeah, someone caught the whole thing on camera, the argument with Jennifer and then you stepping in. It's already all over social media. Keanu raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. People are eating it up? Exactly, Sandra muttered, pulling out her phone. Apparently, we're now the internet's favorite new celebrity power duo. They're calling us the dynamic duo of humility. Keanu couldn't help but chuckle. Well, I guess that's one way to go viral. Sandra shook her head, half amused and half annoyed. It's just so strange. I was just trying to enjoy a flight and now I'm trending. You're always trending, Sandra, Keanu said with a grin. Whether you want to be or not. Sandra glared at him playfully. Don't make me get speed on you, Keanu. I'm pretty sure I can still outrun you. Keanu smiled back, unfazed. You might be faster than me in a foot race, but I bet you can't beat me at chess. Sandra raised an eyebrow, a mischievous smile forming. Chess, huh? I might surprise you. Game on, Keanu said, leaning back in his chair with a grin. As the two friends joked and laughed over their unexpected fame, Sandra couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude. The world was unpredictable, and sometimes, even when things felt out of control, they had a way of turning around. She didn't know what the future held, whether it was the new film she was planning, more social media viral moments, or something entirely different. But for now, she had her coffee, her friend, and the knowledge that whatever came next, she could handle it, and with Keanu by her side, she was ready to face it all. The end, or the beginning of something even bigger.